There's this really powerful and honestly kind of dangerous social pattern that you see again and again throughout history. It's this deep-seated need to find an enemy, a scapegoat, to blame for all our problems. Today, we're going to dig into why that is.
Okay, so let me ask you something. Imagine you're faced with this choice. You've been accused of a crime you absolutely did not commit. Now, if you stand your ground and maintain your innocence, you will almost certainly be found guilty and executed. But if you confess and maybe, name a few other people, you get to walk free. What do you do?
Yeah, this wasn't just some thought experiment. For the people accused of witchcraft in colonial America, this was a terrifying, all-too-real dilemma. A reality that was born from this perfect storm of paranoia, intense religious belief, and a so-called justice system that much preferred a convenient confession over the inconvenient truth.
So, to really get our heads around how something like this could even happen, we've got to go back. We have to start with the absolutely terrifying world of the Salem witch trials.
So you got to understand, life in Salem back then was tough. I mean, really tough. We're talking about a super strict, isolated Puritan community where people were living under constant threat. They were terrified of starvation, of disease, and there was all this tension with their neighbors. On top of all that, in 1692, they were smack in the middle of one of the coldest winters anyone could remember. It was the perfect powder keg for paranoia.
And this image, wow, it really drives home just how real these fears were. For the Puritans, the devil wasn't some abstract idea. They genuinely believed he was an active force in their world, and that he worked through human agents, witches, to cause chaos and suffering. This was not a fairy tale for them. It was their daily, terrifying reality.
And all that pent-up fear just exploded in the winter of 1692. It started when two young girls began having these strange fits. A doctor came, took one look, and basically said they were under an evil hand. Right away, the first accusations were pointed at three women who were already seen as outsiders. And then, one of them, Tituba, confessed. She did it to save her own life, but in doing so, she opened the floodgates. The hysteria just spiraled out of control, and by the next year, 20 people were dead.
And this is where things get just completely upside down. It shows you the twisted logic of the whole thing. The authorities, they weren't really interested in the truth. They wanted repentance. So a false confession, that was actually rewarded with freedom. But maintaining your innocence, that was a death sentence.
So you have to ask, why? How could something like this even happen? Well, it turns out that what unfolded in Salem wasn't some historical one-off. Nope. It was a textbook example of a deep-seated psychological pattern we now call the scapegoat mechanism.
Now, the key thing to get here is that scapegoating isn't just about finding someone to blame. It actually serves a really powerful social purpose. By funneling all of that internal fear, all that aggression, onto one single target, the community gets to feel like it's cleansing itself. It creates this sense of unity and order, even if it's totally artificial.
And the whole process is, well, it's frighteningly predictable. It's like a four-step playbook. First, there's some kind of crisis the community can't explain or solve. Then, instead of tackling the real messy problem, they find an easy target, almost always an outsider. Third, they punish that target. And finally, the group feels like they've solved the problem. And boom, this powerful, if temporary, sense of unity is restored.
And what's really wild is that while the specific triggers change over time, the underlying mechanism is exactly the same. What was a failed harvest in the ancient world is an economic recession today. Fear of angry gods becomes widespread social anxiety. The names and the details change, but that basic human pattern of blame, it stays the same.
You might think, okay, that was ancient history. But nope, this exact same mechanism didn't just disappear. It just put on a modern political costume, and it led to America's very own 20th century witch hunt.
Yep. Fast forward 300 years from Salem, and the witch hunt was back. Only this time, the evil hand wasn't the devil, it was the perceived threat of communism. In the intense Cold War paranoia of the 1950s, the United States launched its own hunt, led by ambitious politicians like Senator Joseph McCarthy.
And the evidence for being a communist? It was just as nuts as it was in Salem. I mean, look at this. You could be branded a communist if you had modern art on your walls, if you signed a peace petition, or even if you just had friends of different races. Anything like that could get you blacklisted from your job and have your entire life ruined. And here's the kicker, the truly devastating irony of it all. The reaction to this perceived threat ended up causing way more damage to American democracy and to individual freedoms than the threat itself ever could have.
It was a decade of fear that destroyed thousands of lives, all in the name of patriotism.
Okay, so this isn't just about the distant past or even the 1950s. The scapegoating mechanism is an incredibly powerful political tool, and it's being used right now. Let's just take a look at a recent example from the country of Georgia.
So in 2024, the ruling party in Georgia introduced a whole package of bills that specifically target the country's LGBTQ+ community. We're talking about laws designed to erase them from public life, deny them the right to adopt children, and even strip transgender people of their rights to health care and legal recognition.
And this quote, well, it gets right to the heart of why this is happening. As observers have pointed out, there's an election coming up, and the ruling party is targeting a minority group to distract everybody from the real complex problems facing the country, like poverty and inequality. It is the classic scapegoat playbook, just deployed for modern political gain. So, we've seen this pattern play out in religion, in politics, across centuries. The big question is, how do we get better at recognizing it when it happens? What should we be watching for?
So here it is, the scapegoat playbook. These are the red flags. Be on the lookout for when a really complex problem suddenly gets blamed on a simple human enemy. Pay attention to who's being labeled an outsider. Notice when fear is being whipped up to justify extreme actions. And maybe most importantly, watch what happens when you question the official story. If that makes you a target, you know something is wrong.
Ultimately, the scapegoat mechanism is just a tool of misdirection. It's all designed to make us look over there at the designated enemy so that we don't look too closely at the person who's doing the pointing and start asking what they have to gain from all our fear and all our anger.